Welcome back. Millions of people in the northeastern US are under flash flood alerts. I want you to take a look here. This is upstate New York. Parts of it saw a once in 1,000 years rainfall event on Sunday. And in New England, Vermont's governor declaring a state of emergency as they are dealing with rare excessive rainfall. CNN meteorologist Jennifer Gray joins us now. From what we understand, it's probably going to get worse. Take us through the forecast.
You're right. We're going to see rain continuing today, tonight, and even into tomorrow morning. So while we already have a flooding situation ongoing on our hands, you're right, it's only going to get worse. Here's a photo from Ontario County. You can see kayaker even in the middle of the road. 50% of all flooding deaths occur from people in their vehicles. People are urged to not get in their cars, to not get in the flooded water, and it's even unsafe even if you are in say a kayak or whatever else. So high risk of excessive rainfall for today. You can see these areas shaded in hot pink. This is a level 4 out of 4. Very rare for the Weather Prediction Center to issue these, but we have had ongoing rain pretty much for the last 2 weeks. We have very saturated soils in this region across the U.S. And so any additional rainfall is not going to absorb into the soil. It's going to run out. Rivers are already running high. It's only going to force them even higher. And we also have some hilly and mountainous terrain in this area as well, which also adds more of a flash flooding risk because that water just funnels down the higher terrain into rivers and they can quickly rise. So that's what we're going to see. Wow. This flash flood warning in effect for much of the state of Vermont. We also have flood watches in effect from New York State all the way to Maine. And so a pretty dire situation ongoing. This is all from a very slow moving cold front. So incredible amounts of rain falling basically on the same areas over and over for hours on end. And so as this front is not going to advance much throughout the day, the rain's really not going to go anywhere. We're going to continue to see the rain fall over these same areas. Here's what radar estimated rainfall. You can see these areas shaded in red and bright orange. That's about 200 millimeters of rain in just a short amount of time. Some of the heaviest rainfall amounts fell in about 6 hours time. So we have seen just incredible amounts. This is as we go through tonight, 7 o'clock. You can see still raining across northern sections of Vermont, northern New England. Tries to clear out by Tuesday in the wee morning hours, but we could still have some showers left over by mid-morning before it all leaves the region. So we're going to continue to see this flood threat. West Point, New York, this is a 1 in 1,000 year event. They had more than 7 inches of rain. That's more than 200 millimeters of rain in just about 6 hours, which if you look at it climatologically, it's only about a 0.1% chance of this happening in any given year. We know due to climate change, this is happening more and more often. These major flooding events that we've seen, many of those across the U.S. in the last year or so.
All right, Jennifer Gray, thank you so much for that. Well, I want to stay with climate, and a new report says that nearly 62,000, get that around your head, 62,000 people in Europe died from heat-related causes last summer. That is enough to fill New York's Madison Square Garden 3 times. The summer of 2022 was the hottest on record in Europe, and the journal Nature Medicine says
51,000 people died.
Are actually underreported. This after days of record-setting global heat.
61,000 people died? My God, that's the equivalency of Madison County. The whole county. Jesus, that'd be all of Jackson, Tennessee. Wow.
Last
Man.
week to bring in John Bellister, a professor at the Barcelona Institute of Global Public Health and the European Research Council. Great to have you with us. I have to say, you know, even just covering the news from a global perspective, that we saw us hitting record numbers 4 times last week, and I'm seeing this report coming through from what we've seen in Europe for 2022. It seems that Europe is heating up much faster than the rest of the world. I want you to take me through these numbers because they are absolutely hair-raising.
Mind-boggling.
Thank you, Eleni, for having me here.
Nerve-wracking.
Yes, indeed. The summer of 2022 was the hottest season on record in Europe. It was a season with records in temperature, drought, and fire activity. And these numbers might be might sound surprising for the general population, but they were already registered in 2003, and so it's not a new story. It's something that it happens and that to which we must adapt in order to reduce this burden.
Yeah, absolutely. Adaptation is going to be vital. I want you to take me through what you learned from 2022 versus the previous years. As you say, we've seen extreme temperatures before, but it seems like we're going on an upward trajectory, which makes, you know, the question about what we'll see in 2023 that much more concerning.
Well, we are experiencing, especially in Europe, a much faster warming than the global average. We have already warmed more than 1 degree Celsius than the global average in Europe, and it's warming at much faster than any other continent. And so we expect that this kind of summers, they generate this kind of numbers unless we adapt. In 2003, it was a different story because it was an extremely exceptional summer that created awareness in the continent. But in summer 2022, we are actually not much warmer than the preceding summer. So it means that this kind of summers are the new normal and will become cooler compared to the ones that are expected to come in coming decades unless we reduce the burden.
Could you give me a sense of the demographics here? Who's most at risk? Who are the vulnerable that are at risk of falling victim to these extreme temperatures? And then the question of adaptation and how to prepare.
Sometimes we think about the heat stroke as the prototypical kind of heat-related mortality, but in reality, what we are thinking is about mostly women, elder people, and people with chronic or pre-existing diseases. So in a way, the heat stress is an extra factor that adds a strain to the physiology of the body. And so this extra stress is the one that determines whether somebody can survive throughout the season or not. And so as much as we are able to cope to increase the general well-being and the general health of the population, we will at the same time will be reducing the heat-related mortality burden.
Yeah. I mean, look, we're hosting, COP28 later this year here in the UAE. The big question on a warming planet keeps coming up. Adaptation, mitigation, going to be absolutely vital because we're not going to see an immediate reversal. What are the immediate interventions that we should be looking at here by governments?
So first of all, we can learn from the adaptation that has been taking place. For example, France was really effective in reducing the vulnerability to heat after the record-breaking summer of 2003, and so we can learn from these kind of experiences. There is a range of actions that we can take. First of all, is to increase the awareness of the problem and how heat interplays with the physiology of the human body, but also there are strategies like increasing general care and public health care and the social services to protect the most vulnerable people, especially people living alone and people with low mobility. And there are other type of measures that are more thought about the long term, like for example, a better and more intelligent urban planning, increasing the amount of green spaces in cities, and also a better design of how we live in the cities, for example, by improving the quality of the houses, the ventilation, and also reducing the inequality and the poverty, especially the food poverty.
A lot to do. Professor, thank you very much for sharing your insights with us. Thank you. Well, northern India was slammed with heavy rains over the weekend as the country's capital saw the wettest day in July in more than 40 years. The heavy rains spurred landslides and flash floods, killing at least 22 people. Rescue efforts are still underway. A main river in Delhi has breached the danger mark. The chief minister there saying more than 40,000 people in low-lying areas could be affected. Forecasters say heavy rainfall is expected for the next 5 days. CNN's Michael Holmes has more.
Waterlogged in New Delhi, umbrellas offering little protection from days of heavy rain. Over the weekend, meteorologists said Delhi received the highest amount of rain in a single day in July in more than 40 years. And a lot of it still pooling on the ground, flooding streets, snarling traffic, and bringing many parts of the city to a standstill.
Whenever people watch stuff like this, they think, "Oh, them poor miserable people. They're being affected directly pertaining to the rainfall." They are. They are. But what most people don't understand and realize is that whenever something like this occurs, it usually messes up a lot of their infrastructure, and their agriculture communities will suffer tremendously. It destroys crops. It ruins pollination. It can be so devastating of one event in one area that it would take that area 2 to 5 years to finally get over that because of the long term. And that's the part that most people don't understand and look at, regardless whether it be a massive flood or a massive drought or fires or whatever. It takes a long time whenever you diminish the resources in the area, it takes a while for people to struggle and get back on their feet again.
This man says he's stranded because his scooter won't start, and he's not sure how to get his bike and belongings out of the water. Some residents are complaining on social media that the floods are a chronic problem in the capital, especially in monsoon season, and that the government should do more to fix the city's drainage problems.
We just came out to have lunch over here, but look at the state of the water logging. I don't know what government is doing about this, and it's not a matter of only 1 year. This happens every year.
Delhi's chief minister on Sunday cancelled leave for municipal workers and said the city's ministers and mayor would also be on the job, inspecting problem areas caused by the rains. Pumps have been installed in some areas to try to divert the water. The deluge is causing similar misery in cities across northern India, with rivers bursting their banks, triggering landslides and flash floods. The monsoon rains are a vital part of life in India, necessary for replenishing reservoirs and watering crops, but too much rain with nowhere to go, at times doing more harm than good. Michael Holmes, CNN.
Well, you're watching Connect the World. There's more news ahead. Stay with us.
Hola.
Get the thing to... Right here.
Residents of Johannesburg, my home city, woke up to heavy snowfall this morning. This is so peculiar, I have to tell you. It is absolutely unusual. It's absolutely unusual in South Africa. Fluffy white snow falling from the sky. The first time it's happened at this magnitude in over a decade. And let me tell you, people were absolutely thrilled.
As you can see, the snow is something that doesn't happen like each and every time. It's just amazing. The weather looks beautiful, you know.
And taking it all in, these kids and even adults wasted no time with this once in a decade occurrence, running around making snowballs, as well as snow angels. You've got to do the snow angels. As fun as it is to play in the snow, it can be also very cold if you're not used to it. The South African Weather Centre issuing warnings because of the cold. So if you're in Johannesburg right now, I want you to have some fun. I want you to stay warm. I have to say that the first time I personally saw snow was when I went to the World Economic Forum in Davos in 2013, and I was doing this as an adult, so I missed this in Johannesburg. It is 36 degrees Celsius here in Abu Dhabi. In Johannesburg, it is 6 degrees Celsius. I'm missing everyone back home. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Eleni Jokos in Abu Dhabi. One World up next with Zain Ashton.
We're seeing major erratic weather patterns that are going off the charts in so many different areas. It's not even funny.
Well, welcome at Windsor Castle from...
There's President Biden doing his thing.
So I think Charles is doing things his own way. This is his monarchy, and he's opening things up a bit more, I think.
Right. As we said earlier, though, despite all of that, I'm sure the special relationship is still intact, despite that possible break-in protocol. Max Postel live for us there. Thank you so much. All right, on the battlefield in Ukraine, local authorities are calling a Russian strike on a residential area that killed at least 4 people, a war crime that happened in a frontline town in the southeastern Zaporizhzhia region on Sunday. Police say a guided bomb hit a school where civilians were receiving humanitarian aid. Rescue workers continue searching for survivors who may be trapped beneath the rubble. Meantime, we're learning details about a stunning new twist following last month's failed mutiny in Russia. The Kremlin says Yevgeny Prigozhin met with President Vladimir Putin on June 29th. That's 5 days after the Wagner chief's short-lived rebellion. CNN's Fred Blyken joins us live now from Berlin. So, Fred, I mean, I guess it sort of begs the question, why on earth would Vladimir Putin host a meeting with the very man who essentially tried to stage a march on Moscow, a mutiny, a rebellion? Just explain the calculation here.
Got the cookie.
Yeah, it is a very interesting question, certainly, Zain, especially since he did that in defiance of Vladimir Putin. He talked about wanting to get to the defense minister and to the chief of the general staff of the Russian military as well. So certainly that was...
I wouldn't be afraid to say that the Russian government has thought about this and thought about this, and they've thought, now how can we do this to make it look like that it was all staged? So they're going to try to crawfish or whitewash this over. That way they can continue to brainwashing their own people over there.
Moment.
And I'm not saying for sure that that's what's happening, but it could be what's happening.
Essentially for Vladimir Putin, and you know, he went on in a message, in a video message later, Vladimir Putin did, and he called this a betrayal. So certainly this seems like a big deal. And now, just a couple of days later, it turns out that Vladimir Putin actually hosted Yevgeny Prigozhin, among others, at the Kremlin for a 3-hour meeting. And it's quite interesting. We were looking at what the spokesman for the Kremlin, Dmitry Peskov, said about this. He said that there were 35, as he put it, commanders who were there inside the Kremlin, including Yevgeny Prigozhin. It's unclear, and the Kremlin refused to comment on this, whether these were all Wagner commanders or whether or not there were also people from the defense ministry there as well. That's something that's completely unclear. But one of the things that also stood out to us, Zane, was that Vladimir Putin, the Kremlin said, talked about the mutiny, talked about how the special military operation, which is of course what the Russians call the war in Ukraine, how that is going. They also said that apparently the commanders that were there, including Yevgeny Prigozhin, pledged their allegiance to Vladimir Putin and to defending the motherland, as the Kremlin put it. But what they also said is that Vladimir Putin apparently talked about possible future engagements, future combat engagements for this group. So that could indicate that possibly a return to the battlefields in Ukraine is something that might be in the cards for the Wagner private military company. Whether or not Yevgeny Prigozhin plays some sort of role in that is obviously very difficult to ascertain at this point in time. But of course, we've seen the narrative really shift at a huge rate in Russia on this. The Kremlin itself saying after that mutiny, that failed mutiny, that Yevgeny Prigozhin would have to go to Belarus. And the Belarusian leader said that as well. And then he said that actually Yevgeny Prigozhin was still in St. Petersburg, and now it turns out that he even managed to get into the Kremlin and speak to Vladimir Putin there. So right now, certainly a lot of uncertainty there as far as that is concerned. And one of the things that we've been keeping an eye on, which is very interesting right now, is Kremlin-controlled media who, they were hyping Wagner for a very long time, then did a complete 180 and were essentially trashing Yevgeny Prigozhin. The last time was late last night on Kremlin-controlled TV. And now we're going to have to wait and see how they try to sell this now. So definitely, potentially a significant development, and certainly also one that does beg the question for many Russians, what exactly Vladimir Putin's calculation in all this is. And it certainly seems to indicate that possibly the Wagner private military company and their fighters are extremely important to Russia's war in Ukraine.
All right, Reply and Life for us there. Thank you so much. Meantime, for some,
I think the right word was try to sell. They're using a strategy, I don't know, in trying to make it look like it was staged, maybe, like Putin maybe already knew that this was going to occur. There ain't no telling what type of manipulation strategies that they're going to use towards trying to justify in the later actions pertaining to the first actions. And it all boils down to there's no honor among thieves, and this is just the beginning. This is just the beginning phasements of the fraction that has occurred over there.
Retired Ukrainians living on the front lines, neither blackouts nor constant shelling are enough to push them from their homes. CNN's been with them.
Let's go on real quick. Get tired of hearing about killings and wars and destruction. If it's not destruction, coming in the forces of nature, it's coming destruction in the forces of mankind. It's like what we just got through looking over right there. All this right here that's going on.
Something has to give at some point, and we saw this right at the start of the current conversation about the proposed tax measures. There has been the much talked about housing levy, which was being introduced at 3% of an employee's gross salary, matched by another 3% by the employer.
Now I hope the world can see what prior President Trump planted a seed towards with the January 6th election. It was 2.5 years ago now. What kind of seed that has planted all over the world towards disruptions happening all over the world. The country's literally imploding. And of course, if you magnify that with COVID, you got a recipe of chaos.
When there was public...
Let's go forward here. It's bad. Anytime people are having to use violence to voice their opinions about a problem, it's bad. That's a commercial. That's a commercial. That's not a commercial.
Over immigration policy, Mr. Rutte is Europe's second longest serving leader, coming to power in 2010. Northern India was slammed with heavy rains over the weekend as the country's capital saw the
went over that. So what else is they're going to talk about real quick before I end up having to change the channel? More war, more Biden. Biden again. Biden again.
The NATO-Ukraine Council could be actually not a talking dot, but actually the engine, the accelerator towards that membership, to define the conditions for Ukraine to join.
And it's obviously clear, as we've touched on over the past year and a half, that Ukraine would benefit enormously by joining NATO. Just explain to us why NATO would also benefit from Ukraine becoming a member. How would this sort of partnership be mutually beneficial for both sides?
Very simply put, for the audience, as long as Ukraine is not safe, as long as Ukraine is preyed upon by Russia and does not have a territorial defense that can prevent the next Russian war invasion, as long as this is the case, Europe is not going to be fundamentally safe. So I think that the key here is for NATO to realize that there is not such a thing as stability in Europe and security in Europe as long as Ukraine is not part of that, and to be part of that is to become a member of the alliance. That's one, I think, the biggest strategic argument for why there is an added value in having Ukraine inside the alliance. Second, having Ukraine inside the alliance means you have much better cooperation and, in a way, control and scrutiny about how Ukraine actually builds its defense, trains its forces, plan its exercise. As now, Ukraine is outside the alliance, and as a sovereign country can obviously make certain choices that maybe one day will not be exactly compatible with what the NATO members will like. So I think the best way to have a powerful and sovereign Ukraine is to have that inside the alliance. It's the same argument that Henry Kissinger made in a pretty impressive long interview he gave to The Economist, where he said that it's much more wise strategically to have Ukraine inside NATO rather than outside.
Okay, let's go to this one right here.
Well, as the officer was saying there, they believe that he is still in the Warren, Pennsylvania area and in the wooded area around Allegheny County, Allegheny, Pennsylvania. They say that, you heard him say that they found stockpiles and camping equipment. And because this man is someone whom they identify as a survivalist with military training, they think that he would be well prepared to hide out in a wooded area. So that appears to be where they are focusing their search right now. And to your point, yeah, he is someone who is being held and considered armed and very dangerous. And he was in authorities' custody on rape and murder charges. So this is someone whom they do consider to be very dangerous, Garrett.
All right, Raheem Ellis on top of it for us. Thank you. And in a Florida federal prison, disgraced sports doctor and convicted sex offender Larry Nassar is apparently in stable condition now after prison officials said this morning another inmate stabbed him multiple times. Nassar, who you'll remember in 2018 pled guilty to sexually abusing gymnasts under his care, including several minors and Olympic gold medalists, is serving up to 175 years on state and federal charges. Kathy Park is following this story for us. And Kathy, what do we know about the events that led up to this attack and about Nassar's injuries?
Hey, Garrett, good afternoon to you. So should point out that this is still very much a developing story. So we have a lot of questions out there that are still unanswered. But we do know, according to a prison union leader, that this supposed altercation broke out this weekend, specifically on Sunday. And Larry Nassar was stabbed multiple times, twice in the neck, twice in the back, 6 times in the chest, and also suffered a lung collapse. You just mentioned there a few moments ago that he is currently in stable condition, Garrett, but that is all we know at this point. We have calls out to the Bureau of Prisons to get some more information about what exactly happened. How did this altercation begin, and who?
It's not so much how it began, it's why it began, because people like this is supposed to be away from open population, which goes back to the warden. How come this guy obviously was in danger to begin with, primarily because of the administration that put him in open population. And a lot of times they won't tell you this, but a lot of times they'll do that intentionally, hoping that that basically street justice will be committed upon to these people that has done such of a heinous crime, because a lot of times the prison system will basically take care of its own. And I know that sounds gruesome, I know that sounds cold and callous, but it's the truth. And a lot of times these jail attendants that is in control of these jails or these prisons, they will purposely allow for these people that's supposed to be in maybe not so much segregation, but they're supposed to be in another area to where they're not around violent people, even though they committed a violent act themselves. But a lot of times they're supposed to be in an area that they're not supposed to be in. And it needs to be a thorough investigation on this particular case.
And who is the other individual? We just don't have those answers at this point. But once again, Larry Nassar suffered a stabbed multiple times this weekend, and is now currently in stable condition recovering. Garrett?
All right, Kathy Park on the developing story for us. Kathy, thank you. Coming up, save the date. The first 2024 Republican contest is set.
See, it's all politics other than extreme weather events or extreme people
Even
events
if you've been turned down in the past, this new legislation allows you to
war
refile
destruction.
a claim.
It's all bad stuff. Bad stuff. Bad stuff. Ain't nothing that I've looked at so far this morning being good.
Just a total government dictated disaster.
And that doesn't work. I mean, we remember those 5-year plans, the 10-year plans in the old Soviet Union. I guess China still has them. The ideas of leaders who think that they can direct the private sector and consumers in certain ways doesn't really work, but you see it on state level as well. You live in California. They're preparing for all electric, I think even sooner than Biden wants the whole country to go there. Will they be ready? I mean, will the electric grids, which are under pressure, be ready, et cetera?
Exactly.
I mean, it's just, I'm sorry to laugh at it because it's really not funny, but my wife and I have been driving, we drive in the summer and you see these signs and they say like, hey, it's too hot, we don't have enough electricity, don't charge your EV and don't use your air conditioning. So this is the condition we're at with relatively low EV penetration, and we're talking about getting rid of oil-powered vehicles by 2035. So no, they're not going to hit that, but anything in that direction is causing these problems. So right now we need to acknowledge, hey, these government dictated policies are bad. Let's get rid of them. Let's have a free market in EVs. And by the way, if you want to help EVs, why don't you actually allow mining? Biden claims to want EVs, and yet he shut down this amazing mining area in Minnesota among just being generally hostile to mining.
That's
so it's
right.
just a total scam.
And we have to go, but these edicts are based on the sort of rhetoric that Greta Thunberg and others have come out with. Say, Greta Thunberg, I think, just put out that in 5 years, if we don't get off of fossil fuels, the world will be gone. All civilized life on the planet will end. I mean, these kind of statements are not helping their cause, are they?
Well, what they do is they just make people panic and do really stupid, panicky things that make no sense versus actually thinking long term. I know we're running out of time, but if people want to learn more about this, check out my book, Fossil Future, which has a real energy roadmap for the future.
I'm glad you got that in there. Alex, thank you very much for being here, my friend. I appreciate it. And congratulations on getting married. I hope you and your wife do greatly. I'm sure you will. Let's check in with Brian.
He even admitted himself that we're running out of time.
Not so much here.
So they say one thing by meaning something, but then they'll turn around and contradict themselves by saying something completely, totally different. Crazy. Loco. Cuckoo.
She just did 2 more, and I don't understand why she needed to do that. And she's being accused of kowtowing to the Chinese official because of that behavior. Now, some people were saying, there was one former White House staffer who was in W's administration who was saying, oh, you never bow. There's a difference between bowing, like fealty, and then doing what in Asian culture is, like a greeting. And I don't know if it just seems weird what she was doing there. We're going to talk to Stephen Yates about this because it seemed It seemed weird. I actually, because you guys know I hate shaking hands. Although I will say, after the lockdown, it made me want to go and do everything from lick doorknobs to shake hands. Because I just got so rebellious about it. But the worst thing is when you shake someone's hand and it's wet because they're a sweater, like a palm sweater. You know what I mean? That's like that's their hand juice. It's so gross. It's just can't deal. So I like the little bowing thing, right? Just like a greeting, not like a bowing like, oh, this is like my curtsy, or I'm, showing some sort of demonstration of fealty.
You see what I'm saying? 30 seconds before that, she just got through saying, oh, it was so weird. So they say one thing, but then they turn around and contradict themselves by saying something else. Talk about crazy.
Ron DeSantis 20 or 30 points behind the former president. Look, I think the damning week that Ron DeSantis had has really put him on his heels. His own super PAC spokesperson said it's Donald Trump's race by a long shot. DeSantis now, you're seeing him change his strategy a bit, where he had said he might not debate Trump or might not join the GOP debate in August if Trump did it. Now he's saying he will, because Ron DeSantis realizes he's at risk of losing relevancy. Now he holds a juggernaut of a campaign.
See what I'm saying? Flip-flopping. Going from one thing to another. They actually do not know, the American politicians does not know what position to take based upon either common sense values or based upon getting more points. And to some degree, a lot of them could care less about face value concerns, because they're more concerned about getting elected right now than they are about telling the truth about what's actually going on. So they say one thing out of one side of their mouth, but then they turn right around and they say something contradictory in the other side of their mouth, which once more is a verification of the red man that accused the European white man of white man speaketh with forked tongue. And you got to really pay close attention to a lot of times how they're doing it and what they're doing it. And I think subconsciously, most of them don't even realize that they're doing it. They're just getting up there and just whistling Dixie, saying whatever needs to be said at the time that it gets said, even though what they just got through saying may be in total contradictory response towards what they said the day before, or in some cases within the same conversation. The conversation started out this way, but then they go the other way. So we're dealing with a very, very emotional chemically imbalanced society right now that basically don't know their rear ends from a hole in the ground. And I've said this before, that they know that they have failed the American people towards leading us down this road of $30+ trillion in debt, and now seeing all the problems originate regarding the forces of nature in addition to the forces of man, such as Putin and Yemen and other wars that's breaking out. They're confused. They don't know what to do. They don't know what to say. They don't know which part to play a part in. Wow. If we are not, as a society, in an era of stress that could lead into doom, I don't know that if we're not in that era right now, we'll never be in that area. And I know that we're in that era. We're definitely in the area of confusion. That is all part of the characteristics or the aftermath of Satan that the Bible talks about, that is the author of confusion, that is out to kill, steal, and destroy. That's where we are, my friend. That's where we are. And it's really sad. It's sad that America has lost its footing. Like I told you a while ago, what went on January 6th, 2.5 years ago, has planted a seed all over all these other countries, including Russia and Ukraine. Russia and Ukraine come about after January the 6th. January the 6th was 2.5 years ago. Russia has been at what they've been doing now for over 500 days, which is a year and a half. So Russia come after January the 6th. You need to pay close attention to other countries towards the disturbances that they're going through right now of what that seed planted that Donald Trump wanted to drain the swamp. And instead of draining the swamp, it looks like he's going to drain the whole canal pertaining to the world being at its wit's end. Especially when people get up there and they say one thing and 5 seconds later they contradict themselves by saying something different. I think it was Kennedy that said that you can please all the people part of the time, you can please part of the people all the time, but you'll never please all the people all the time. These politicians that's getting on national TV or whatever and getting these people to support them and back them, they need to figure out that they're not going to be able to satisfy everybody. You cannot please all the people all the time. You can only please part of the people all the time, or all the people part of the time, but you'll never please all the people all the time. They need to get that through their thick skulls. And they need to get up there and debate on things that are worthy to not only the American people, but the world, and what the world right now is facing off on. Regardless whether it be a major war, or a major flood, or a major drought, or a major starvation, or a major this, or a major that. They need to be in the grassy row, as my grandfather used to always say, and get where you need to be. If you get where you need to be, if you load the front end of the wagon, the back end of the wagon would take care of itself.
Campaign, well financed, well orchestrated, a digital mail.
None of it's well. None of it's well. None of it's well. It's sick. We're dealing with a sick society right now.
To root out harassment in the military.
I felt it was a little too late. When I joined the JSTF, I had a lot of dreams of what I wanted to achieve there. Had the JSTF fully investigated what happened to me, I feel like I could have stayed on there. Everything came too late.
Sexual abuse in military
Yet undefeated
concentration camps all over the world. It's awful. It's absolutely awful.
Flag. It's bad enough that they've made the word patriotism something that doesn't have universal appeal. Don't do this to the issues of child abuse and sexual trafficking. Those are genuine, real issues, and everybody should care. Forget politics. These are issues we should all be united as a nation. Their reaction to it is reprehensible.
I fear it's a little too late, Kennedy, because I think at this point, weirdly, if you online search for anything involving child pornography or child trafficking, it automatically ushers you into a crafted narrative that it is a right-wing conspiracy theory. Confoundingly, it's not based on any logic.
Well, and you don't have to overblow the statistics to know that children are abducted, and people make a lot of money through human trafficking, especially with children, and it's something that a lot of people don't want to talk about because it's so heartbreaking, and it's god-awful to think about what is really happening to these children. But there are some incredible agents and former special operators who create organizations like these because they know the government has failed so many of these children. So it is these private individuals who have formerly served who are going out, and they really are doing the Lord's work.
That's right. They're the true heroes. More outnumbered in just a moment.
Now that made a little bit of sense.
Better at home.
That made a little bit of sense. Bunch of sickos out there. World's become wicked, evil.
I'm so glad we did this.
Yes, on July 21st. And finally, a sight rarely seen in South Africa. Snow, yes, you heard me correctly, snow. In South Africa, here you see it falling from the sky, covering the ground. It is the first significant snowfall in Johannesburg in more than a decade. Children, many of whom had never seen snow at all, ever in their lives, actually went out to play and even folks who remember past days.
It don't say in the Bible per se that in the end times that summers, that we will not be able to identify summers from winter or winter from summers, but it does say in certain scriptures that the earth will become so imbalanced, people running to and fro and from, of knowledge being expanded. It does talk about the world basically being as a drunkard. It does say that. And if we're not in that era right now, we'll never be in that era, which is a very, very complex, dangerous era to be in right now, because we have knocked it completely out of the rim towards stability. And it's not just stability pertaining to either nation politics or world politics, but also stability pertaining to the weather, the forces of nature, that's basically being as a drunkard, going to and fro and from. That's what that means. That in the last days, the weather will become erratical to the point that it will be as a drunkard. Well, what does a drunkard do? A drunkard is liable to go just as far to the left as they do the right. They really don't know which way they're going. They're drunk. And that's what the world right now, we're seeing a very, very, very sick, emotional, psychological, political, spiritual, emotional, literal, metaphorical planet that, I guess in some cases, even the fish, even the birds, even wildlife in general is confused. They're as a drunk. They don't know if they want to be gentle. They don't know if they want to be vicious. They don't know if they want to stay in the water, or 500 of them want to beach themselves and kill themselves automatically. They're confused. They don't know what they want. We're in a state right now that we have never ever been in. And it's a very, very dangerous state, because if there's ever been a time that somebody like the Antichrist could come onto the scene, that according to the theologians and the preachers that I've heard, that's supposed to have all the solutions to all the world's problems, if there's ever been a time for that opportunity to arise, we're basically looking at that opportunity. And that opportunity can come in the form of war. It can come in the form of peace. It could come in the form of love. It could come in the form of rejection. It could come in the form of whatever. In other words, the world has become very, very vulnerable, in the magnitude that you basically can't take nothing off the table towards what's going to occur from one day to another, from basically 1 hour to another, because it's that unstable. The people are unstable, the weather is unstable, our politics is unstable, our religious beliefs are unstable. I could go on and on about the instability. It's basically imbalances. And these imbalances are all under the pretense of that scripture that I'm talking about, for they will be as a drunkard, going to and fro and from. It does talk about the weather to some degree. I can't remember exactly where it was at. It may have been Proverbs, where it says something about the weather will be out of line towards normalcy, and that's basically what we're seeing today. It may not be in Proverbs, it may be in some of the scripture, but it's basically what we're seeing today, because of areas just like you just got through talking about in Johannesburg, of them having this snow that they haven't seen now in how many years? 50 years or more?
Severe risk in a nation where poverty and homelessness are indeed widespread. All right, thank you so much for watching.
A rare snowstorm. Unbelievable. Unbelievable how things is just off the charts right now in going from one extreme to another. We're talking about a country that ordinarily is burning up, to the degree that people had never seen snow. And you got to keep in mind, whenever these occurrences happen, the weak and the vulnerable, the young, the old, the ones that's more susceptible, can't handle this type of transformation going from one extreme to another. And there'll be a lot of people that'll probably die out of this. There'll be a lot of people in South Africa that will literally probably freeze to death, or because their deteriorating health was already deteriorating, it'll throw them off into another state of deterioration to the point that eventually they'll die of a cold or pneumonia or whatever. The bad thing about what's going on right now, people like us here in America can put on a coat, we can take off clothes and put on clothes. We got access to air conditioning, we got access to heating. The animal kingdom does not have access to those things. So can you only imagine how frightful that it would be, let's say, the penguins up north in the snow line areas up in the Antarctica area, the polar bears, all the other animals that are used to that type of climate that now are seeing the climate changing right in front of their very eyes. Can you only imagine how frightening that would be if you was one of those animals, regardless whether you was a polar bear or a penguin, and now all of a sudden you're realizing, oh my God, my world is crumbling, my world is collapsing around me. And there's absolutely nothing, I repeat, nothing that they can do to stop it. And I tend to wonder if we have already done reached that plateau ourselves, we just haven't accepted it yet, that we've already done set our trajectory towards doom and gloom. And that's the reason why that the Bible talks about in the last days that no flesh shall be saved, but for the elect's sake whom he has chosen, that those days would be shortened. Good luck to all of us. God bless America, and heaven help us all. Heaven, please help us all. Shalom.